Than used to be. Thoughts.
I wanted to find the most tense possible introduction from our guest plethora of playlists that would allow me to set the right vibe going into this episode. I believe that
That,
did it.
that absolutely did. I was actually quite surprised about this rather dystopian choice of music for your personal taste as I know it. But hey, it looks like me grinding you slowly down has left some psychological effect on you.
Oh man, it has. It definitely has. I would like to welcome everyone to the 45th episode of Money Trees. It's a beautiful start to the week as we welcome one of the first people I met on my personal Web3 journey. This person is as kind, intelligent, and empathetic as it gets. They exemplify these qualities in all that they do. A leader on the Zora team, a multi continent touring DJ, and a lover of quality human interaction. Welcome, Michail Stangl, to the show. How are you feeling
Thank
today?
you. Thank you so much for these really, really kind words and this incredible introduction. I mean, I feel like I should like clarify a few things. I mean, you were especially the part like internationally touring DJ. I mean, that hasn't happened, in quite some time for obvious reasons. But then again, I'd crossed the border for my last gig, so in terms of PR speak, it checks out. I am an internationally touring DJ. I'm okay. It's a Monday in Berlin. It's Monday evening. The world is in a very weird place right now. So many things feel somewhat as if you are in a state of cognitive dissonance. But we got to continue to do what we love doing, which is making the world a better place for you and me and everyone around us. So, to the
Mikhail
full extent of our
refuses.
individual abilities, to
You
keep
refuse to give
make
yourself the
short
flowers you
sentences.
deserve.
No, I refuse to make short sentences.
Oh no, no! I apologize for talking over you. Twitter had cut me out
No,
there,
it's okay.
but just to the point of PR speak, it's not PR speak. The fact that you can tour on different continents really says something about the sound. It says something about your ability to curate and to put together shows that relate with people that come from completely different walks of life. And that is a skill. That is one that not a lot of people have, even in the DJ world. Even people that are huge names. There's certain places where they just can't go because they don't understand the culture, they don't understand the sounds of that area. And so to be able to, have that on your belt, it's very impressive. There are many impressive things that I feel like you do. I'm going to give you all the flowers on the show, even if you do
Thank
feel
you so
like
much.
adding your own anecdotes to it. I'm okay with that
Mm.
as well. But you made a
I mean,
really good
I
point.
do take that one thing in terms of being able to tell certain intercultural narratives through music. I read actually yesterday a really funny tweet that DJing is making songs kiss, which I incredibly love. But that is an aspect of curation. Curation can be also something that is a little bit more, let's say, intuitive, but nonetheless includes also certain cultural and intercultural references. So these things are not arbitrary, but in one way or the other, connected maybe through certain rhythm forms or certain, genesis of the sound, or even, through relationships that one only knows because they know the stories behind the music. But nonetheless, that is true. I do take that. I think I'm quite okay, quite good with that.
Even in your responses, it's so clear the breadth of your music knowledge. And I think that when we were first connected, that was one of the things that really just impressed me was the level of understanding you had about the technicalities, but also the cultural histories that go into music. And I I don't know where this comparison will fall on your like meter, but when I
Mm.
think of the biggest internet music nerds, that is Mr. Fantano's headline, but I would argue that you are probably one of the biggest music nerds that I know in any genre or anywhere in the world. Where did your love for music start?
Oh, I mean, okay. So, thank you, by the way. That's an incredible compliment because you're the person working with international superstars. So that means a lot coming from you. But what is my inability to focus on anything else but music that barely anyone listens to come from? What kind of childhood trauma got me into this place? I mean, I've been always fascinated. Well, I can tell you. I mean, ultimately, not the music that I experienced as a child, because when I was born in the Soviet Union, so there wasn't really that much music to begin with. We had, I don't know, like whatever made it through the Iron Curtain. One of the first records I remember is actually Whitney Houston, funny enough, even though we called her back then Whitney Houston. But when I came to Germany in 1991, like all the music really was completely new to me. I had no context for anything because I grew up obviously removed from Western cultural context, or pretty much removed. So this fascination with things that are new, for which I don't have context, things that are emerging, that is, I think, the driving force for that. And ever since, I've been obsessed with it. And this is also why electronic music in particular is so interesting for it, because it is very, futuristic. It's ever evolving. It's very easy. New things manifest in it very easily, and new things through, various production techniques like sampling, like basically like quoting. New contexts can be created for sounds that have existed for quite a while. And that is just literally the fascination, that the fact that creativity doesn't seem to come to an end. Wherever you look, there's always something that is new, exciting, for which you don't have context yet. I would say that that's the main driver of my curiosity.
Woohoo! See, yep. Again, Michail, I love hearing you talk about music. So we're gonna stay on this for a little bit longer. We touched on your DJing and how that has taken you all over the world, and it literally has. Can you talk about what it was like starting to DJ? Actually, yeah, just start there. What was it like starting to DJ?
I mean, like obviously, I got really lucky because I grew up in Germany in an area that was kind of very important to German DJ culture in the 90s. So a lot of the music genres that kind of now dominate the clubs, like techno, trance, or even harder stuff like gabba, kind of was came about in that area. And there was also a presence of underground music on national radio, which is how I got very quickly into the stuff that interested me early, which was like kind of drum bass and jungle. And of course, you got immediately exposed to DJing, immediately exposed to the role of the DJ, both as somebody, who facilitates an experience, but also guides the experience, but also, creative part of that. So I wanted to become a DJ pretty early, but also unfortunately grew up fairly poor and had no money for records or record players, despite trying, to do the like being paper boy, working at McDonald's, that kind of stuff. And when I moved to Berlin, I actually started to produce and produce my own edits. At that time, the second wave of the so-called second wave of dubstep had just started, 2005, 2006. It's a very exciting time where every tune that came out at that time kind of felt relevant, revolutionary, like it was changing the fabric of music as we knew it. Obviously, it was converging with other, Afro-diasporan sounds out of UK like grime. So kind of adding your own note to it, doing your own edits with music that kind of wasn't part of that. That's how I started to do live set DJ hybrids, and then, slid into Berlin DJ culture very, very quickly. And again, it's all about how do you contextualize things that have a relationship, but might not be an obvious relationship. And this is, I think, like some people call my style of DJing eclectic, because they're like, holy shit, there's so many genres. But usually all of these things are somehow intertwined or a logical progression of each other, So if you're within 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours, or if you play in Berlin, sometimes 6 hours, get from 90 BPM to 240 BPM, this is not like an erratic journey that happens by accident, but usually, one that can also be, retold why, certain things can be paired with each other. Sorry, this is a really long theoretical answer on the art of DJing.
I love it because to me, it makes sense why you believe in the Web3 and NFT space. Being able to contextualize sound in this way. And we think about, it's something that you've actually said before, where, you talk about the interoperability in Web3 and the ability that gives artists to create these very intimate spaces and create these like intimate practices. And we've been doing that with sound. And now Web3 is even opening the door for more people to do that with any level of, or, quite a few different mediums. And I think that's a really good segue into Zora. And I remember when I read the Zora white paper, and that was one of the first conversations we had outside of music, was just talking about Zora. Because I read that paper and it seemed like it was the most blissful white paper I had read to date, where it was highly technical, but the goal that it seemed to be reaching for felt like it had so much of humanity's best interest in mind, which I know sounds like very cliche and over the top, but I would argue that it's a mission that you all are building over there that seems very possible. I remember reading Jacob's article on hyperstructures again, and the first two papers that I read just in regards to Zora both made me feel that way, where it was this forward-looking approach to this revolutionary technology that we weren't seeing from many other players in the space. I think Zora is patient in their approach. I think that, yeah, it feels good, and I know good is very subjective, but to me, that is the way to dumb it down and just say when you look at other things, they can feel a little icky, and Zora never was. What inspired you, or what did you love about Zora and the team that made you want to get involved?
I mean, like before I get to that, I wanted to say something when you try, hinting at the segue between, my practice as a DJ and then also my involvement in Web3 and the kind of interoperability of sound. What I personally found particularly intriguing in that intersection of culture and technology is if it referring to electronic music. I mean, electronic music and club culture is also a techno-social construct. It's highly reliant on certain technological advances, like all the electronic music instruments, but also the kind of futurism that is embedded within many of these narratives. But also, it's a social space, it's a political space. You go often and most of the time, so the genesis of electronic music club culture is that you went partying, yes, of course, for hedonism, for fun, for kind of transcendent experiences, but very often, clubs are social and political safer spaces. And very often these are used to figure out new configurations of society. Certain social utopias are very often kind of experimented with in clubs. Maybe, certain experiments when it comes to self-expression, aesthetical or sexual or so forth and so on. Or maybe, even political questions that are being negotiated, in the culture that is embedded within electronic music and underground, club culture. So there's a very big connection to Web3, which is, again, a techno-social construct. It's a highly complex technological tool set, some of which is arcane to me, but also it aims at kind of renegotiating certain social relationships that we have built in society or that are enhanced or governed by technology through, technological means. So that is what got me fascinated in technology as a cultural space, because, until very recently, I was more a curator and a cultural worker that was using an online media platform to tell the stories that I wanted to tell. But looking at a level deeper, how can technological infrastructure impact how culture grows and how it also benefits from a socio-political point of view, a greater subset of society. This sparked my interest in Web3. And of course, Zora in particular, because Zora is, like very few other things, driven by principle. There's profit motive and there's principle. And very often, you can judge a person by what they do when the question is about their principles. Everyone will at some point in their life come to a certain moment where they have to choose between, am I doing something that's profitable for me, but against my principles, or do I do something that is not profitable for me, but I stay a principled person? This, of course, requires that your principles are moral or, ethical or, good. But nonetheless, I assume that this is a given in the context of this conversation. And Zora, is principled because it has decided to build technology in a way that centers the needs of the people using the technology versus the needs of the people who are building the technology. And that is ultimately why we ended up in this, and pardon my French, shit show that the internet is in the year 2022, because we're coming off the back of 20 years of platform capitalism, where the only driving motive of designing things very often was the return on investment for whoever owned the technology. Interface design decisions were made not with the best interest of the users in mind, but with the best interest of the people who designed the interface in mind, which was, somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, whose financial needs and hyper-individualism, led to the fact that we have on one side the second coming of fascism, and on the other side a whole generation of young people with body dysmorphia, because this was, driving money into the hands of Instagram. So that fact, was you already said, that there's something to the narrative that hints at a will to do good, at a will to make technology that benefits people versus making use of them, is the reason why Zora was the first Web3 company I looked at, and the reason why I'm still involved with it now, 18 months down the line.
So eloquently said, much better than I did. Thank you for adding context to when I said it's good. It is principled, was a much more accurate description of your approach and the technology that's being built. And the idea that, something can be simultaneously free forever to utilize and extremely valuable to own. That is a quote from the Hyperstructures article that I mentioned earlier that really helps kind of surmise to me the approach and why people are always like, well, what's in it for them? Why would they be doing this principled thing? Who's funding that? How does this all work? And it's like, no, there is a balance that comes between the ability to make profit and deliver on something that aligns with your principles. So shout out to Zora.
It is a general, yes, the question, what is in it for me, is a conversation that we find ourselves having very often when it comes, to politics, and in particular, what is our individual responsibility towards our fellow citizens, both on a local, a national, or international level. And that depending on how, where on the, if there's like an axis between socialism on one side, neoliberalism on the other side, depending on how your society aligns to one or the other end, these questions have more logical answers for some and more illogical for others. The sense of, like asking me or any European citizen, like, does universal healthcare make sense, is, a very weird question to ask, because everybody would say immediately, yes, of course. And yourself that in the US, this is a way more complicated conversation. So yes, this is again, how do you perceive society? What do you think is societal contracts? That kind of smart contract that our society operates in, and what responsibilities do we have towards each other? And within that, you always have then both poles, individualism or mutuality. And I tend to be on the side of mutuality, of course.
Where do you think Web3 as a whole is heading? And now I know that is a huge question to answer from a general sense. But when I say that, it's more along the lines of, are we on a good track or on, there goes that word again. Are we on a net positive track, or do you think many more things have to break for it to reach a positive place?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about that quite a lot, just also because, the geopolitical situation in this part of the world has changed, significantly over the last 6 weeks. I mean, not that the world was, free of conflict beforehand. Every conflict that was happening over the last, in my lifetime, no matter if it's, what was happening in Myanmar or Yemen or Ethiopia or Palestine, all are equally tragic. But there's also certain geopolitical forces at play right now that just make you reconsider some of the concepts and, ideas that you might have, thought were important, whether they are important at this point in history or not. So I've been thinking a lot about this. And I do think that the one aspect about Web3 that is net positive is that we are currently in a process of acquiring something that we have largely abandoned in the late 90s, which is an attempt at digital literacy. So digital literacy is basically the ability to interact with the technological systems around you with critical distance and an understanding what the effects of your interaction are. And this is something that we did not have at large within society, and not just aiming at, certain barriers of access to that understanding, technological barriers, geographic barriers, or, other sociopolitical, socioeconomic factors, but rather, how we were, even as people who spend a lot of the time on the internet, understood what was actually happening around us. And we could not understand that because all of these systems were black boxes. These were closed systems where we very often had very little agency over the output that we were putting in. And that is, data brokers. I just saw this morning a video by, John Oliver, about, data broker businesses and what they, do. And this is an effect of that or result of that. So we did not have this digital literacy, which means that we also didn't have much agency. If you do not know what the things you do on the internet do with you beyond what you see as a reaction of the interface, then you have no agency really. So Web3, because of its complexity, because of a lot of it is being kind of realigned, reshuffled, built anew, drives a huge amount of people into engaging in a critical way with these highly complex technologies. They understand way more about how is this structured, why are certain things the way they are, so I input X, I get the output Y, and people understand that. That is net positive because critical thinking is always net positive. Like anyone who's capable of questioning has already, that's good. What's critical and why I'm personally afraid is that we're also coming off the back of a really dangerous time in our society. Attention spans have shrunk tremendously. The halftime of media, of any kind of digital asset has shrunk significantly. We live in a very, very quick, fast-paced and nearly manic environment. So and that is also, based on the fact that the last 20 years were driven by this very toxic startup mentality of disrupting things for the sake of disruption. This is when I initially said, Mark Zuckerberg's hyper individualism. This is what I meant by it, that you have individuals like tech entrepreneurs or groups of people who think that their individual approach to a thing, and even if it disrupts commonplace, agreed upon societal, societal ways to handle things, is a better way to go about it than what society has decided we do. So disruption is very often rooted in a hyper individualism, or somebody thinks I know it better than millions and millions of people, and tons of established processes. And then you get something like Uber or Airbnb. In Web3, I have the fear that because so much of it is new, because so many people that are building it are also so young and also come from a certain socioeconomic class and a certain, geographical location, that we get something that is a little bit, on one hand, ahistorical, because it does not take into account the overall global development of technology, but then again, in its understanding of what society is and how society manifests itself, is rooted in a very, very particular blueprint of society, and that is the kind of US American, blueprint. And that, as much, this is not, I'm not trying to give a critique of America, but that is also a way to go about things that is very specific to a very specific part of the world and does not apply to the rest of the world. So if the new internet is built according to this blueprint, then we get again weird phenomena, dysfunctionalities, and inequalities. And given the very financial nature of a lot of Web3 things, I'm somewhat wary of that.
Yo, you touched on so many fire points in there, and I agree with so much that you said. Thinking about the increase in transparency and what's actually being built, I do believe that will, as you mentioned, further digital literacy and allow people to critically think more about the systems that they're participating in, that they give their information to, that they give their time and attention to. And we will see what that does to, the general public as that becomes more and more commonplace. It's interesting thinking about NFTs. Actually, I don't want to tangent too much on this. I also love the idea of removing the black box and allowing people to have access to some of the information that's going on. Even me personally, not to plug my own thing, but it's like my idea behind the blueprint was just to do that, was to provide a way for this to feel like less of a daunting task, for it to feel like, hey, this is a space that you can come into and have information provided to you, so it doesn't seem like it's a bunch of terms and terminology that you've never ever seen or heard before, that's only known, like I said, it's arcane, and there's elements of that become difficult to a point where people will eventually just give up, and the same imbalances of power will recreate themselves in this space. So there's a lot of good potential in there, but then a lot of things to be wary of along the way. And yeah, I really love your explanation and breakdown of that. I cannot wait to clip that and put that on the show. As far as I've only ever lived in America. I just started traveling outside of the country a couple years ago, and even that culture shock was very different to me. And so much of what's happening in this space is not only being led by Americans, but a lot of what's going on with like the EU and the laws are limiting a lot of the innovation in the space, and the way the American government is moving on crypto. There are some potential harsh laws, but for the most part, it's the wild, wild west right now. And there's a lot that's being propagated before the rules are getting set up. So it's all very, very interesting to see how it will shake out. I'm personally, quote unquote, bullish on it. I believe that despite what's going on, like, to your point, like there were previous conflicts. Clearly the last 6 weeks have been at a level that's relatively unfamiliar to the rest of the world. But it was very interesting to me, even thinking about the donations and the ability to send money through crypto rails. And I know there were a lot of negatives that went along with that too. But I know personally, with us and our team being able to get money to our artists through this method that we would have otherwise been unable to. And that one small piece, even though, that's one group of people and one artist, I think at scale becomes one of those net positives that we can have in the space. And yeah, really wasn't much of a question in any of my response there outside of, I love the way you articulated that. And I think you touched on some fire point.
I mean, I do not want in any way erase the work or presence or ideas of many people that are in the Web3 space, that are not in the US, that are not in Europe. You know yourself. I mean, we're both in constant touch and involved with many great teams, artists, builders, people who think these technologies in a way that are on one hand specific to their community needs, but also very different in terms of what they try to achieve, in terms of what they try to achieve as a result for society at large. So that, of course, is all present, but it's also a fiscal fact, so to say, that a lot of the money, that a lot of the investment, that a lot of the people kind of leading these conversations, and not leading these conversations because they have the best ideas, but because they have that position, that proximity to money and power, that they can lead these conversations. That very often, these come from the US. They come from certain, again, socio-demographic groups, and that is something that is, needs to change if we are really serious about this kind of radical language of liberation that Web3 very often uses or sometimes appropriates, but that there's a real life opportunity for not only generational wealth, but also to use technologies that until very recently were available to some privileged few and now can be built on scale, disregarding your access to these technologies. That is incredible. And yes, the Ukraine war has been a proof of concept for that, because as you have been sending money to your creative collaborator, we've been sending money to many of the refugees, that were stuck in Ukraine and had to get out. So there is a proof of concept of that this technology can create. It's functional. It's functional. It's there. I'm still critical of many of the things, when it comes to cryptocurrencies. But some of the ideas that this all kind of created over the last 18 months, they will not go away. And I think the most impactful ideas are less the ones of financial, freedom, but rather about how do we use these technologies to align interest, but also to participate in value creation, in digital value creation, and then also participate in that value that is being created digitally. Because until very recently, these two things were more or less kind of separate. You would create digital value on a digital platform like Instagram, but the money that would be more or less made with that value that you are created, that was completely separate. It was in a different financial system. It was, a different, even digital, language or unit. And now these things can be one of the same, tokenized. And I'm not a specialist on tokenomics, in no way, I'm actually really bad with money and numbers, but I understand that this interdependence now of creating value digitally through your participation, which we all do, and then also being able to benefit from the monetary value this interaction creates, because these are two of the same things. Now, that's pretty powerful and needs to be explored, especially when you pair it with stuff like workers-owned businesses. Many of the NFT and Web3 platforms that we're looking at are de facto cooperatives. They're worker-owned businesses. And looking at, the very urgent and very current conversations around unionization, especially in the USA, there's a huge argument to be made to explore these things further.
Extremely powerful, I would even say. As we're sitting here talking, I'm kind of reminded of the relatively cliche quote that children are the future. And, we talked about how many of the people that are building in this space, it's not necessarily the fact that they have the best ideas, but they just have that access. And it does skew relatively young. which is interesting to me for a lot of reasons. But speaking outside of America or Europe or even Asia, when we look at the continent of Africa, that is where the largest youth population exists. And we think about that accessibility, where I've talked to numerous artists from the continent, and the two largest blockchains aren't really cost efficient to operate there. And if we can find a way to empower the best ideas without people that are not of the diaspora being the ones who capitalize, it becomes very, very exciting to me. And so, yeah, I don't have the exact solution, but it is something that in the coming years I will be focused on providing the opportunity to, just because that excites the hell out of me, seeing what these very, very, very resourceful kids can do as they are given more and more access, more and more resources.
But this is also, when we talk about, cultural hegemonies, is that this technology now is so powerful, but also so easily to be implemented and to be used, because the idea of just taking a protocol or some sort of open source technology and fork it and then make it your own is there. It's part of the. It's a feature. It's not a bug, which means that also having the confidence of saying, only because these are currently the two most used ecosystems, but we believe that for our community, for our industries, for what we are trying to build, there's a different alternative, and to believe in, the power that one could have if they would do it, ignoring the hegemonies that exist right now. There's a lot of potential in that, and I do think that this is also going to happen, because of young people, especially across the African continent, South America, or other non-European, non-North American countries won't be able to participate in this. They will just take the best ideas that are there because they are open source and build something equally powerful but more equitable for themselves. So at least I hope they will do.
Yeah, I think with that it becomes a balance of, the powers that be trying to keep the status quo and being able to drive adoption on any of these new creations. And yeah, it's a bit this is all conjecture at the moment, but I think that we will see many of the things we're speaking on come to pass. This took I don't want to say a serious turn, as if that wasn't the entire plan for it. But Em, I love talking to you and hearing some of your more thoughtful approaches on life and just the state of the world. It's always refreshing to me. I every time we have these conversations offline, I state that there, and so this isn't something new. I always tell people money trees are a lot of the conversations I have out on the fringes anyway, and I'm just bringing them online for you to hear what I talk about with some of my friends. I would love, before I let you get out of here, to talk on some slightly lighter topics that just are about you.
What? What do you mean?
So, you are a vegan, correct?
Yes, sir, I am now 15 years, I think.
What led to you being a vegan?
I mean, you wanted a light answer. Do you really expect that I'll be? Do you expect that I would give you an answer? Be like, whoa, the snacks were better. No, I mean, veganism is a political project more than anything. Ultimately, the access to food, or the privilege of being able to decide what you eat and what you don't eat. And most people don't realize that in our society, where also multinational corporations that profit from the fact that people can only access low quality nutrition is a highly profitable business, which means that to be able to access high quality nutrition is a privilege, and that is inherently fucked. And we're not even talk about, the fact that animal lives being made into a tradable commodity. Now, again, this is not me trying to say, that the way I look at society is a blueprint for each and every society there's plenty of context where animal-based protein as a source of nutrition makes complete sense infrastructurally or culturally, and I would never argue with that. But for the larger part of society, this is pure capitalism, and one that is incredibly destructive, both for us individually, and also for society as a whole. So when I started to live off my own money, I kind of decided first, of course, to opt out from it, because I was like, this is a system that I just can't support. And then also, psychological reasons, because animals, kind of find the idea of eating animals disturbing, to say the least. But the more you engage with it, the more of a political project it becomes, because, food is human rights, food is workers' rights, food is geopolitics, food is sustainability and questions of ecology. So that's ultimately why I've been doing that, because I think it kind of reflects some of the other values, that I apply in my everyday life. And, I've been told multiple times that apparently there's a Sex and the City episode, which is a show I never watched, but apparently many people have watched, where there's certain conversations about vegans and their benefits. So I guess, even in this regard, I made the smart decision to be one. Yeah. And the snacks are better.
No, I didn't. To answer your question, I did not think that would be lighter. I was being a little bit facetious with that transition. It was something that I would imagine you had a charged answer to. And just while we were talking on those topics, again, I really appreciate the perspective you provide. I believe that we're all amalgamations of the people that we spend time around, and the conversations that we have, and the people that we allow to influence us, or even whether it's inadvertently or advertently. Is advertently a word? I don't know if that's...
Inadvertently is a word.
No, advertently, like the opposite of inadvertently. Anyway, I'm going to check on that.
I would assume it is so. It sounds like a word.
That's, yeah.
Like advertently, adversarial, but I'm not a linguist, and English is just not my mother tongue.
Well, it is my mother tongue, and I'm still not 100% sure on that one. But I digress. An actual light topic I will bring up, and just to add some shine to, still to this day, I remember we had our first video chat, and I was like, holy shit. I have never in my life seen such an HD Zoom call. And you just have an amazing setup. So shout out to you. Shout out to the attention to detail you've paid to that setup. And
shout out to my skincare routine that I can afford myself being seen on HD.
Shout out to your skincare routine. So before you go, you have to share either your skincare routine or the equipment you have in your setup that provides such crisp quality.
Skincare routine, because most people do the most basic things completely wrong, and this is one of the things that is very easy to invest some time into, doesn't require much work, and makes you just, like the best thing about go about your day is like when you look into the mirror and you look at yourself and you're like, what, this is actually all pretty cool what I see there. And to contribute to that, you have to do through small details. So clean your face, like get yourself a soap-free face wash. Doesn't need to be anything fancy, just like something soap-free. Then get a toner, but most importantly, an alcohol-free toner, because alcohol dries out your skin. That will make you look wrinkled. Many brands put alcohol in the toner. Don't know why. Witch hazel, can only recommend it. Use a little serum, to get your skin on the right pH level, and use in the evening a moisturizer, in the morning daily SPF. Most of the wrinkles and the tiredness and also, pigmentation, stuff like that comes through the fact that people don't use SPF. And even these days, when you're inside all day, still use some protection, because that UV light comes through your windows onto your precious skin. And if you start doing that in your 20s, then in your 40s, you still look somewhat, decent, especially if you pair it with a vegan diet. and avoid drinking and smoking. So that is my little, 12 steps to be at least looking like a functional adult recommendation.
I love it. We might have to add everyone's beauty tips to compare, but I will say that is money trees first. That seed will be planted. I will adjust a little bit of my own skincare routine based off some of the elements I've heard that I am now missing, and I would
Mm-hmm.
love to look as dashingly taut in my face as I do currently. What were you about to
I
say?
mean, you said that you look like a tot.
No. Taut, like my skin is taut. My skin is.
Sorry. There was
Yes,
a
yes.
misunderstanding. Just like that's not a cheap
No.
joke on your behalf.
I had to give up a little bit of the self-deprecating jokes. I did stand-up comedy in college, and they were like, "We just don't believe you. We don't believe that you're having a hard time with some of this." And
Okay?
anyway, I digress again. That was
You were looking too good and too successful for these type of jokes.
you said it, not me. Anyway, no, I'm kidding. Seriously, before I let you go, there are two questions we ask every Money Trees guest. The first question is going to be, what is your seed phrase? Now, I know in this space, your seed phrase is normally your account recovery key. I just do not believe that that is a scary enough term. If you are new and trying to learn about it and someone tells you to protect your seed phrase, it doesn't sound like that's something that if you lose access to, you will lose all of your assets. So here on Money Trees, we have repurposed seed phrase to be a saying, a quote, a slogan, a motto, a lyric that you live by that embodies your approach to your career, to your craft. So, Michail Stangl, what is your seed phrase?
I just want to be real with you. That is something that has been for many years my bio. And even though that sounds like slightly weird or, kind of inconsequential, I mean, ultimately, what does that mean to be real with someone? That means that you first need to be your honest, true self. You cannot be real with someone if you yourself don't know who you are as a person, both in a positive and in a negative extension, because if you know your own failures then and limitations, then you can be more of a compassionate and empathetic human being. And you also extend that to other people, that you do not betray them, that you are your real self, that you are driven by your principles and not by something that is what's the word for that, that you just sincere, open, truthful, and real. That's my seed phrase, I would say.
I just want to be real with you.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. The second question is going to be, when we list this one of one Money Trees number 45 with the signature base face and the finger guns on Zora. Yo, shout out to Zora, y'all. Like, I've been meaning to drop this thread that I wrote about why I love putting out my NFTs through Zora, and I will sooner than later. But it's just a seamless experience, and it's actually on the blockchain. I love the way the collection looks, interacts with my contract perfectly, my listings. Anyway, not to turn this into more propaganda, but shout out to Zora. We're going to list this one of one NFT on Zora. What is the price going to be?
Oh, I'm setting the price.
Yes.
I did not know that.
Note.
I mean, it's my face. It's priceless. I've not thought about that. I mean, I want. Damn it! Now I've not sold an NFT yet, so that these long threads of how to price your NFTs get really, really complicated, and people have mathematical formulas to do so to yield the highest possible result. Various forms of auctions are being applied. But let's just start with 0.02 ETH. That seems for me like, that someone will probably buy it. And if it really has value, then it will find its real value in the upper echelons of bidding wars. But I do hope that there's just, somebody with a little bit of Ethereum, that the one person that deserves it. And I don't want them to pay too much for it.
See, I did not want to deal with pricing these NFTs. To me, I wanted to focus on the guest and the conversation and create some audio and digital art that when I look back 20 years from now, I will love to have immortalized on the blockchain. I love seeing the range and just the thought that the guests go into pricing their own NFTs, whether some may find it outrageously high or outrageously low and underpriced. I think it's all interesting, and we'll see how the economics of it plays out. But to me, again, another shout out to Zora. I put these on the blockchain and then they're there. And ideally, ETH, they will outlive me as long as ETH stands, and it will be quite the collection of lovely faces to have come on Money Trees and been immortalized in the form of these notes. So,
and I'm very happy that I'm happy that I'm one of these faces.
I am too, genuinely and sincerely. Thank you for joining us today. This has been, as always, an incredible and educational conversation. I appreciate your perspective.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll be chopping. We have tons of other things in the work that I need to get up with you about. So
you know where to find me. I rarely disappear from that very place that you see in high definition. So ping me when you need me.
With your beautiful soft purple lights. It's such a good setup. Is it purple? Is it lavender? Like
it is a RGB light, so it technically on my light it is a setting of 247, but I would say it is purple. So
there it is. We gave you a little piece of the setup right there.
Okay. Alrighty, friends.
Okay. Yeah. Enjoy your week. We'll talk soon.
Same to you, and thank you so much. I'm looking forward to listen to this, actually. I think we said a couple of smart things. Alrighty, have a wonderful week, my friend. Peace out.